Captain Marcus Chen had seen many alien worlds during his 15 years serving the Terran Diplomatic Corps, but nothing quite prepared him for the opulent throne room of Baron Vexatar on the crystal moon of Thessaria Prime. The massive chamber stretched endlessly upward, its walls made of living crystal that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Floating platforms carried alien dignitaries of various species, their conversations creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and harmonious tones that echoed through the vast space. Marcus stood at the center of it all, his simple black diplomatic uniform making him appear almost insignificant among the elaborate robes and natural armor of the assembled aliens. The weight of humanity's future pressed down on his shoulders like a physical burden. Earth desperately needed access to the Thessarian trade routes. Without them, the human colonies on the outer rim would slowly starve as supply lines stretched beyond sustainability. Baron Vextar dominated the scene from his crystalline throne, a towering figure even by Thessarian standards. His 4 arms moved with practiced grace as he gestured dismissively at the holographic trade proposals floating before him. The Baron's elongated skull bore intricate tattoos that marked his noble lineage, and his 6 eyes studied Marcus with unconcealed amusement. When Thessarians found something particularly entertaining, their skin would shift to a pale golden hue, and right now, Baron Vexatar practically glowed. "So, human," the Baron's voice resonated through the chamber's translation systems, carrying undertones that suggested barely contained laughter. "Your species wishes to join the Galactic Trade Consortium. You offer what exactly? Your primitive manufacturing, your crude mining techniques, your laughably simple agricultural methods?" Marcus kept his expression neutral despite the murmurs of agreement from the assembled crowd. He had dealt with alien arrogance before, but the Thessarians took it to an artistic level. "We offer innovation, Baron Vextar. Human creativity and adaptability have allowed us to colonize 17 worlds in less than 2 centuries. We believe diversity strengthens any alliance." The Baron's laughter boomed through the chamber, a sound like crystal chimes being struck by hammers. Several of the floating platforms descended as their occupants moved closer to witness what was clearly becoming entertainment rather than serious negotiation. Innovation? Creativity? Baron Vextar rose from his throne, his impressive height making Marcus crane his neck upward. "Humans have been in space for barely 300 years. My family has controlled these trade routes for over 10,000 years. We have seen a dozen species like yours rise and fall." Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks but maintained his diplomatic composure. "Perhaps that experience makes you wise enough to recognize potential when you see it." Potential. The Baron's skin shifted to a brighter gold, and his courtiers began making sounds that the translation system interpreted as appreciative laughter. "You speak of potential while your colonies struggle with basic resource management. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your military consists of chemical rockets and kinetic weapons. What could you possibly offer that we cannot already obtain from more advanced civilizations?" The human diplomat reached into his briefcase and activated a small holographic projector. Images of human achievements flickered to life. The reconstruction of Neo-Tokyo after the asteroid impact, the terraforming of Kepler 442b, the rescue mission to the Centauri colonies during the solar flare crisis. We offer something that can't be measured in technological advancement alone. We offer the human spirit. Baron Vextar's expression shifted to one of genuine puzzlement. The translation system struggled with the concept, providing several alternative interpretations before settling on a phrase that roughly meant essence of struggle persistence. The Baron's 4 hands gestured dismissively as he settled back into his throne. "Spirit? Essence? These are abstractions, human. The Galactic Trade Consortium deals in concrete resources and capabilities. Your emotional concepts have no place in serious negotiations." The Baron paused, his 6 eyes studying Marcus with what appeared to be growing amusement. However, I find myself entertained by your persistence. Perhaps there is a way for humanity to prove its worthiness to join our consortium. Marcus felt a glimmer of hope mixed with wariness. In his experience, when alien nobles found humans entertaining, it rarely led to favorable outcomes. What kind of proof would satisfy the Baron? A test of your vaunted human spirit, Baron Vextar announced, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. The conversations on the floating platforms died away as every being present focused their attention on the unfolding drama. I have a daughter, Kira Leth. She has been unable to speak since birth, despite the best efforts of our medical specialists. Her condition brings shame to our family name. The Baron's skin took on darker hues as he spoke, patterns of deep purple and black swirling across his crystalline features. Marcus realized he was witnessing genuine pain beneath the alien noble's arrogant exterior. The Thessarian concept of honor was tied closely to family perfection, and a mute heir would indeed be seen as a significant weakness. If your human spirit is truly as remarkable as you claim, Baron Vextar continued, his voice gaining strength and returning to its mocking tone, then perhaps you can succeed where our greatest healers have failed. Make my daughter speak, and I will personally sponsor humanity's entry into the consortium. Fail. The Baron's pause stretched dramatically. And humanity will be banned from Thessarian space for the next century. Marcus felt his mouth go dry. The stakes couldn't be higher. A century-long ban would doom the outer colonies and likely set back human expansion by generations. Yet the alternative was to walk away with nothing, which would achieve the same disastrous result more slowly. I would need to understand her condition better, Marcus said carefully. And I should mention that I'm a diplomat, not a medical specialist. Oh, but that's what makes this so deliciously ironic. Baron Vextar's golden glow intensified. You claim human creativity and adaptability are your species' strengths. Here is your chance to prove it. You have 7 standard days to accomplish what our specialists have failed to achieve in 23 years. The assembled aliens began creating sounds that the translation system couldn't properly interpret. But Marcus didn't need a translator to recognize the sound of beings placing bets on an entertainment spectacle. He was being set up to fail, but spectacularly and publicly, which would serve as a cautionary tale for other primitive species who might dare to seek entry into the Thessarian sphere of influence. I accept your challenge, Baron Vextar, Marcus said, his voice carrying more confidence than he felt. But I request permission to contact my ship for research materials and consultation with our medical experts. Granted, the Baron waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. Though I doubt your primitive medical knowledge will prove any more effective than ours. Kira Leth will be brought to the guest quarters tomorrow. Try not to make her condition worse with your fumbling attempts at treatment. As Marcus was escorted from the throne room by silent guards, he could hear the betting continue behind him. The sound suggested that the odds were not in his favor. The corridors of the Thessarian palace were works of art, with flowing curves that seemed to have been grown rather than built. Bioluminescent panels provided soft, shifting light that followed no pattern Marcus could discern. His assigned quarters were luxurious by human standards, though clearly designed for Thessarian anatomy. The furniture was too tall, the doorways were too narrow for multiple beings to pass comfortably, and the sleeping platform was designed for a creature that didn't require the same support structures as a human spine. Marcus activated his communication equipment and began the process of contacting the Terran research vessel, Endeavor, which waited in orbit above Thessaria Prime. Dr. Sarah Kim's face appeared on the holographic display, her expression immediately shifting from professional interest to concern as Marcus explained the situation. As the mission's chief medical officer, Sarah had spent months preparing for potential biological and medical challenges they might encounter during the diplomatic mission. Marcus, "This is insane," Sarah said after hearing the full story. "We know almost nothing about Thessarian neurophysiology. Their brain structure is completely different from human anatomy. Even their concept of speech might be fundamentally different from ours." "I know," Marcus replied, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "But if we refuse, we lose everything anyway. At least this way we have a chance, however small. What makes you think we can succeed where their own specialists have failed? Thessarian medical technology is centuries ahead of ours in most areas." Marcus stared out the window at the alien landscape beyond the palace grounds. In the distance, floating cities drifted among the crystal formations that gave the moon its distinctive appearance. Maybe that's exactly the problem. Maybe their advanced technology is making them overlook something simple. Or maybe, Sarah's voice carried a note of hope mixed with skepticism, this is exactly the kind of impossible problem that humans are uniquely suited to solve. Send me everything you can about Thessarian anatomy and their daughter's specific condition. I'll get our entire medical team working on this immediately. "Sarah," Marcus said as he prepared to close the connection, "I need you to understand something. If we fail at this, we don't just lose our chance at the trade agreement. We become a cautionary tale that will follow humanity for generations. Every alien species will know that humans failed to live up to their own claims about human potential. Then we'd better not fail," Sarah replied with the kind of determined smile that had made her one of Earth's most respected xenobiologists. "Give me 12 hours to analyze their data. And then I want to meet this girl myself. If there's a solution to be found, we'll find it." As the connection closed, Marcus looked out at the alien stars scattered across Thessaria's night sky. Somewhere among those lights were the outer rim colonies, depending on him to secure the trade routes that would ensure their survival. Tomorrow, he would meet a young alien woman whose condition had baffled the greatest medical minds of a civilization far more advanced than humanity's. The pressure was overwhelming. But Marcus found himself thinking about all the impossible things humans had accomplished throughout their history. They had walked on dead moons, built cities in the depths of oceans, and learned to make dead worlds bloom with life. Perhaps Dr. Kim was right. Perhaps this was exactly the kind of challenge that would prove what humanity could really accomplish when pushed to their limits. The next morning arrived with artificial sunrise, as the palace's lighting systems gradually increased their output to simulate the natural day cycle of Thessaria Prime. Marcus had spent most of the night reviewing every piece of information he could access about Thessarian biology, culture, and medical practices. The more he learned, the more impossible his task seemed to become. Thessarian vocal communication was incredibly complex, involving not just sound production but also controlled manipulation of their skin's bioluminescent patterns and the emission of specific pheromones. A human trying to understand their concept of speech was like a person born deaf trying to comprehend a symphony by studying sheet music. The mechanisms involved were so fundamentally different from human communication that finding parallels seemed hopeless. A soft, chiming sound announced the arrival of his breakfast, delivered by a floating service platform that navigated through the palace corridors autonomously. As Marcus picked at the alien fruits and protein substitutes that comprised the meal, he tried to prepare himself mentally for meeting Baron Vextar's daughter. The guard who came to escort him was different from the previous day's escort. This one seemed younger, with skin patterns that shifted nervously between pale blue and green hues. As they walked through the palace corridors, the guard spoke in carefully pronounced Standard Galactic, the trade language that most species used for interspecies communication. "Human Marcus," the guard said hesitantly. "I should tell you something about Lady Kirilleth. She is..." different from what you might expect. Marcus looked at his escort with interest. In his diplomatic experience, guards rarely offered unsolicited information unless they felt strongly about something. Different how? She understands everything perfectly. Her mind is sharp, perhaps sharper than anyone realizes. But when she tries to speak, the guard's skin patterns shifted to deep purple, indicating emotional distress. It is painful to witness. She becomes frustrated, sometimes violent. Many who have tried to help her have given up because they cannot bear to see her suffer. You care about her, Marcus observed. The guard's skin shifted to a pattern that Marcus didn't recognize, but the emotion behind it was unmistakable. Lady Kirilleth saved my life once during a palace fire. She could not call for help, but she stayed with me and helped me reach safety. She is worth more than her father realizes. They arrived at a section of the palace Marcus had not seen before. The architecture here was different, softer somehow, with rounded edges and gentle curves that seemed designed for comfort rather than intimidation. The guard stopped before a door that seemed to flow seamlessly from the crystalline walls around it. "She knows you are coming," the guard said quietly. "Try to be patient with her. And remember, her silence does not mean ignorance." The door dissolved at the guard's touch, revealing a chamber that took Marcus's breath away. The room was clearly designed for someone who experienced the world differently than most Thessarians. Instead of the harsh, crystalline beauty that characterized most of the palace, this space was filled with soft textures and gentle, flowing forms. Floating shelves held what appeared to be art projects, though their purpose was unclear to human eyes. And in the center of it all sat Baron Vextar's daughter, Kirilleth. Kirilleth was nothing like what Marcus had expected. Where her father was imposing and intimidating, she possessed an ethereal quality that seemed almost human in its vulnerability. Her skin displayed patterns Marcus had never seen before, swirling combinations of silver and deep blue that moved across her features like living artwork. Unlike other Thessarians, whose skin patterns seemed to follow predictable emotional states, hers appeared to be creating something entirely unique. She looked up as he entered, and Marcus was struck immediately by her eyes. While most Thessarians had 6 eyes arranged in symmetrical patterns, Kirilleth's were different. They were larger, more expressive, and seemed to hold an intelligence that was almost startling in its intensity. When she saw him, her skin patterns shifted to what Marcus instinctively recognized as curiosity mixed with cautious hope. "Hello, Kirilleth," Marcus said softly, settling himself on one of the flowing seats near her workspace. "I'm Marcus. I came here to meet you, not to cure you." The distinction seemed important to Marcus, though he wasn't entirely sure why. Perhaps it was the guard's warning about her intelligence, or perhaps it was something he saw in her eyes, but treating her like a problem to be solved felt fundamentally wrong. Kirilleth tilted her head, studying him with an expression that reminded Marcus powerfully of his own daughter back on Earth. Then she reached for something on the floating shelf beside her and handed it to him. It was a small crystalline sculpture, but as Marcus examined it more closely, he realized it wasn't decoration. The crystal had been carved with incredible precision into what appeared to be a 3-dimensional representation of mathematical equations. "This is beautiful," Marcus said, turning the sculpture in his hands. "Did you make this?" Kirilleth's skin patterns brightened noticeably, and she nodded enthusiastically. She reached for several more pieces, each one more complex than the last. As she showed him her work, Marcus began to understand what he was seeing. These weren't just art pieces. They were functional models, representing complex engineering and mathematical concepts that even human scientists would struggle to visualize. "These are propulsion systems," Marcus said with growing amazement as he examined a particularly intricate piece. "This one represents a gravitational field manipulation design that our best theoretical physicists are still trying to understand." Kirilleth practically glowed with pleasure at his recognition of her work. She moved to another shelf and brought back what appeared to be technical drawings, rendered in the flowing Thessarian script, but accompanied by detailed three-dimensional holographic models that projected from crystalline bases. Marcus studied the designs with growing astonishment. These weren't the work of someone whose mind was impaired. These were the creations of a genius, someone whose understanding of advanced physics and engineering surpassed most professionals in those fields. Yet this brilliant young woman had been dismissed by her own society simply because she could not speak. "Kirilleth," Marcus said carefully, "when you try to speak, what happens exactly?" She looked at him for a long moment, then moved to a wall panel and activated what appeared to be a recording system. The image that appeared showed Kirilleth at a younger age, perhaps equivalent to a human teenager. She was sitting with what Marcus assumed were medical specialists, their elaborate equipment surrounding her. In the recording, young Kirilleth opened her mouth as if to speak. Her skin patterns shifted rapidly between different colors and configurations, but no sound emerged. The frustration was visible in every line of her body as she tried again and again. Finally, she collapsed in obvious distress, her skin patterns becoming chaotic and painful to watch. The medical specialist concluded that her vocal mechanisms were physically normal, came a voice from behind Marcus. He turned to see Baron Vextar entering the chamber, his massive form somehow managing to move with surprising quiet. But something prevents the connection between her mind and her ability to produce speech. They theorized that it was a neurological condition, possibly genetic. Marcus watched as Kirilleth's skin patterns immediately shifted to darker hues upon her father's arrival. The change was subtle but unmistakable, and it told Marcus more about their relationship than any words could have. "Have you considered," Marcus said carefully, "that the problem might not be neurological at all?" Baron Vexatar's expression shifted to one of barely concealed annoyance. "Human. Our medical specialists have studied this condition for decades. They have examined every possible cause, tested every treatment, consulted with the finest minds in the galaxy. What could your primitive understanding possibly contribute to their analysis?" Marcus stood and walked over to examine more of Kirilleth's work, aware that both father and daughter were watching his every movement. "Baron, your daughter is clearly brilliant. Her understanding of advanced engineering and physics is remarkable. She communicates effectively through her art and her technological creations. Have you ever considered that her silence might be a choice, rather than a disability?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Baron Vexatar's skin shifted to dark, threatening patterns. "Are you suggesting that my daughter is deliberately refusing to speak? That she chooses to bring shame to our family name?" "I'm suggesting," Marcus said, turning to face the Baron directly, "that maybe she doesn't have anything to say to people who see her as a problem to be fixed, rather than a person to be understood." The silence that followed was deafening. Baron Vextar's four arms tensed, and for a moment Marcus thought he might have pushed too far. But then he noticed something interesting happening with Kirilleth's skin patterns. They were shifting rapidly, but not with distress. Instead, they seemed to be forming complex, flowing designs that reminded Marcus of written language. "Kirilleth," Marcus said softly, "are you trying to tell us something?" She nodded eagerly and moved to another wall panel. This time, when the holographic display activated, it showed a complex, three-dimensional model of what appeared to be the Thessarian vocal communication system. But as Marcus watched, the model began to change, showing variations and modifications that diverged significantly from the standard Thessarian anatomy. "That's impossible," Baron Vextar breathed, his anger forgotten in the face of what he was seeing. Those modifications would change the fundamental nature of Thessarian communication. Marcus studied the display more carefully, his mind racing as he began to understand what Kirilleth was showing them. She's not broken, he said finally. She's evolved. The Baron turned to stare at Marcus as if he had lost his mind. Evolved? What are you talking about? Look at the modifications she's modeling. Marcus pointed to specific areas of the holographic display. These aren't random changes, they're systematic improvements. Enhanced frequency ranges, more complex harmonic capabilities, additional pheromone production centers. She's not unable to communicate in the traditional Thessarian way. She's capable of communication that's far more advanced than traditional Thessarian methods. Kira Leth's skin patterns brightened significantly, and she quickly manipulated the holographic display to show even more detailed models. As the complexity increased, Marcus began to see the true scope of what she was revealing. Her communication capabilities weren't impaired. They were so far advanced beyond normal Thessarian abilities that they were completely incompatible with standard communication methods. It's like, Marcus said, searching for an analogy that would make sense to Baron Vextar. Someone with perfect pitch trying to sing along with an orchestra that's playing out of tune. The problem isn't that she can't sing. The problem is that she can hear mistakes that no one else can even detect. Baron Vextar was staring at his daughter as if seeing her for the first time. But if this is true, why has she never tried to explain this before? Marcus looked at Kira Leth, who was watching her father with an expression of patient sadness. Maybe because no one ever asked her what she thought was wrong. They all assumed they knew what the problem was and focused on trying to fix her instead of listening to her. Dr. Kim's voice suddenly came through Marcus's communication device, which he had left open to maintain contact with the medical team on the Endeavor. Marcus, I've been analyzing the data stream from your location. What I'm seeing is incredible. Those genetic modifications she's modeling aren't random mutations. They follow a clear evolutionary pattern that would take most species millions of years to develop naturally. Baron Vextar's skin patterns shifted to something Marcus had never seen before. A complex interplay of colors that seemed to suggest profound confusion mixed with dawning understanding. Are you saying that my daughter represents some kind of evolutionary advancement for our species? I'm saying, Dr. Kim's voice continued through the communication device, that she represents a quantum leap in communication capability that could revolutionize interspecies contact throughout the galaxy. If she can demonstrate these abilities, she wouldn't be bringing shame to your family. She would be making your family the most important diplomatic lineage in Thessarian history. Marcus watched as Kira Leth's skin patterns began to shift into configurations that were unlike anything he had ever seen from a Thessarian. The patterns were more complex, more nuanced, and somehow more beautiful than traditional Thessarian communication displays. As the patterns flowed across her skin, he began to sense meaning in them, even though he had no training in advanced Thessarian communication methods. She's trying to speak, Marcus said with sudden understanding. She's been trying to speak to you all along, but in a language that won't exist for thousands of years of normal evolution. Baron Vextar approached his daughter slowly, his own skin patterns shifting to what Marcus recognized as wonder mixed with apology. Kira Leth, he said softly, I have been blind. I saw only what I expected to see, not what was actually before me. Kira Leth's response came not as words, but as a cascade of skin patterns that seemed to flow like music made visible. The beauty of it was overwhelming, and Marcus found himself understanding emotions and concepts that had no equivalent in human language. She was communicating forgiveness, love, and hope, but also frustration at decades of being misunderstood and dismissed. The question now, Dr. Kim's voice came through the communication device, is whether she can adapt her advanced communication abilities to something that others can understand and learn from. If she can teach this evolutionary leap to others, it would benefit not just the Thessarians, but every species in the galaxy. Marcus looked at Kira Leth, who was watching him with those remarkably expressive eyes. What do you think, Kira Leth? Are you willing to try to bridge the gap between where your people are now and where you've already evolved to be? Her response was immediate and unmistakable. Her skin patterns shifted to configurations that clearly meant yes, but the beauty and complexity of her expression made the simple affirmative response into something that resembled poetry written in living light. Baron Vextar stood watching his daughter with an expression of growing amazement and shame. All these years, I thought she was damaged. I brought healers and specialists to try to make her normal, when she was actually showing us the future of our species. The future of all species, Marcus corrected gently. If her communication abilities can be understood and adapted, they could transform how different races interact throughout the galaxy. Misunderstandings that have led to conflicts for millennia could become impossible when beings can communicate with this level of precision and emotional depth. Kira Leth moved to another section of her workspace and began manipulating a complex holographic interface. As she worked, the air in the room began to shimmer with patterns of light and subtle chemical traces that Marcus could almost feel rather than smell. The effect was hypnotic and beautiful, but more than that, it was clearly meaningful. "She's creating a translation matrix," Dr. Kim's voice said with excitement. "She's showing us how her advanced communication methods can be broken down into components that other species can understand and potentially learn to produce." Marcus watched in fascination as Kira Leth continued her work. The holographic displays showed increasingly complex interactions between different alien physiologies and communication methods. She was demonstrating how her evolved abilities could serve as a universal translator, not just for words, but for emotions, concepts, and ideas that had previously been impossible to share between different species. "This is remarkable," Baron Vextar said, his voice filled with wonder. "She's not just communicating. She's teaching us how to communicate with beings whose thought processes are completely different from our own." As if in response to her father's words, Kira Leth turned toward Marcus and began creating skin patterns that seemed specifically designed for his human visual perception. The patterns were simpler than what she had shown before, but somehow perfectly adapted to convey meaning to someone with human neurological structures. For the first time since entering her chamber, Marcus heard her voice. It came not as sound, but as meaning that appeared directly in his consciousness, bypassed his ears entirely, and spoke to his mind with crystal clarity. "Thank you for seeing me instead of my silence," her voice said inside his head, warm and musical and unmistakably real. "I have been waiting my whole life for someone to understand that different does not mean broken." The impact of finally hearing her thoughts was overwhelming. Marcus felt tears running down his face as he realized that this extraordinary young woman had spent decades trapped in isolation, surrounded by people who loved her but could not understand that her silence was not emptiness, but rather a fullness that exceeded their ability to comprehend. Baron Vextar gasped audibly, his skin patterns shifting to configurations that clearly indicated he had received the same mental communication. "Kira Leth, I can hear you. After all these years, I can finally hear my daughter's voice." Her response filled the chamber with patterns of light and meaning that conveyed forgiveness, love, and hope for the future. But it also carried something else, something that made Marcus understand why this moment was so crucial for more than just one family's reconciliation. She was ready to teach others what she had learned. She was ready to share the gift of advanced communication with anyone willing to learn. And that willingness to share, to bridge the gap between what was and what could be, would change everything. Word of the breakthrough spread through the palace faster than Marcus would have thought possible. Within hours, the corridors were filled with Thessarian nobles, scientists, and dignitaries, all eager to witness what many were calling the greatest discovery in their civilization's history. The irony was not lost on Marcus. that the daughter who had once been seen as a source of shame for Baron Vextar's family was now elevating them to unprecedented prominence. The great throne room had been transformed into something resembling a laboratory crossed with an amphitheater. Floating platforms carried observers from dozens of different species, while sophisticated recording equipment captured every detail of Kirilleth's demonstrations. The young Thessarian woman stood at the center of it all, no longer hidden away in her private chambers, but proudly displaying abilities that defied everything her people thought they knew about communication. Marcus watched from a place of honor beside Baron Vextar's throne as Kirilleth worked with a team of xenolinguists and communication specialists from across the galaxy. Each species presented unique challenges, their methods of exchanging information ranging from the crystalline harmonics of the Viridian chorus to the quantum-entangled thought patterns of the ethereal collective. Observe. Kirilleth's mental voice reached not just Marcus, but everyone in the chamber who was willing to open their minds to her enhanced communication methods. Her skin patterns shifted into configurations that seemed to resonate with the Viridian crystal beings, creating harmonic frequencies that they could understand and respond to. Simultaneously, she was producing quantum fluctuations that the ethereals could interpret as complex philosophical concepts. Dr. Kim's voice came through Marcus's communication device, filled with scientific excitement. Marcus, what she's doing should be impossible. She's essentially creating a universal communication protocol in real time, adapting her output to match the receiving capabilities of dozens of different species simultaneously. But Kirilleth was doing more than just demonstrating her abilities. She was teaching others how to recognize and respond to the enhanced communication methods she had developed. Working with volunteers from various species, she was showing them how to expand their own communication capabilities beyond their traditional limitations. A Rigelian scientist, whose species communicated primarily through electromagnetic pulses, was the first to successfully respond to Kirilleth using her enhanced methods. The moment of contact was visible to everyone in the chamber as a brief, brilliant flash of coordinated light and energy that carried emotional content far beyond anything the Rigelians had ever achieved before. "Extraordinary," the Rigelian announced, his translator struggling to convey his excitement. "I have just experienced communication that transcends the boundaries of species-specific limitations. This young Thessarian has shown me how to express concepts that my people have felt but never been able to articulate." Marcus found himself thinking about the implications for humanity's future in the galaxy. If Kirilleth's methods could be learned and adapted, humans would no longer be disadvantaged by their relatively primitive communication technology. They could participate as equals in galactic civilization, contributing their unique perspectives while learning from the accumulated wisdom of older, more advanced species. Baron Vextar rose from his throne, his massive form commanding immediate attention from everyone in the chamber. His skin patterns displayed a complex mixture of pride, humility, and determination as he addressed the assembled crowd. "For 23 years, I believed my daughter was afflicted with a condition that brought shame to our family," the Baron announced, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. "I was wrong. She was not afflicted. She was gifted. While I saw only what she could not do, she was developing abilities that represent the next stage in the evolution of galactic communication." He turned toward Marcus, his expression serious. "Human Marcus, you came here seeking trade agreements for your species. You offered human creativity and adaptability as your people's contribution to galactic civilization. You have proven the value of that offer in a way that none of us expected." Marcus felt the weight of thousands of alien eyes focused on him as Baron Vextar continued. "It was human insight that recognized what our greatest specialists could not see. It was human perspective that understood my daughter's true nature when our own preconceptions blinded us to the truth. The Galactic Trade Consortium would be fortunate to include a species capable of such innovative thinking. The chamber erupted in sounds that the translation systems interpreted as approval, though Marcus suspected the reality was far more complex. He could see representatives of various species engaged in animated discussions, and he realized that humanity's admission to the consortium was no longer the primary concern. Something much larger was happening. "There is more," Baron Vextar announced, raising one of his 4 hands for silence. "My daughter has proposed the establishment of a new institution, a Center for Advanced Communication Research and Education. This facility would be dedicated to developing and teaching the enhanced communication methods she has discovered. It would be open to all species, regardless of their current technological level or communication capabilities." Kirilleth stepped forward, her skin patterns shifting into the complex configurations that Marcus now recognized as her advanced communication mode. But this time, she was also producing sounds, actual spoken words in standard galactic that everyone could understand. "For too long," she said, her voice clear and strong despite decades of silence, "different species have been isolated by the limitations of their communication methods. We have missed opportunities for understanding, cooperation, and growth because we could not truly share our thoughts and feelings with one another." Her words were accompanied by skin patterns that conveyed emotional undertones impossible to capture in any traditional language. Marcus could feel the depth of her conviction, her hope for the future, and her determination to bridge the gaps that had separated species throughout the galaxy. "I propose that we move beyond the limitations that have divided us," Kirilleth continued, "not by abandoning our individual ways of communication, but by learning to understand and appreciate the unique perspectives that different communication methods provide. When a viridian crystal being shares their harmonic thoughts with a quantum-entangled ethereal, and both can understand the electromagnetic poetry of a Rigelian, we create something new. We create true galactic unity." The response from the assembled crowd was immediate and powerful. Representatives who had never been able to communicate directly with one another began attempting to use Kirilleth's methods to share their thoughts across species barriers. The results were often clumsy and incomplete, but the effort itself was revolutionary. Marcus watched a scene that he knew would be remembered as a turning point in galactic history. Ancient rivals were attempting to share perspectives that had been impossible to communicate before. Species that had been locked in misunderstandings for centuries were beginning to see each other's points of view with unprecedented clarity. Dr. Kim's voice cut through his amazement. "Marcus, we're receiving communication requests from over 40 different species. They want to establish cultural and scientific exchange programs with Earth. The recognition of human adaptability that Kirilleth demonstrated has opened doors we never even knew existed." But Marcus found his attention drawn back to the young Thessarian woman who had started this transformation. She was moving through the crowd, working with individuals from different species, patiently teaching them the basics of her enhanced communication methods. Her patience was remarkable, especially considering how long she had waited for others to understand her. "Human Marcus," Baron Vextar's voice drew him back to the immediate situation. "My daughter has made a request regarding the establishment of her Communication Research Center. She wishes for humans to serve as co-administrators of the facility." Marcus felt his breath catch. The implications were staggering. Not only would humanity be welcomed into galactic civilization, but they would be given a leadership role in one of the most important institutions in the galaxy's future. "She believes," the Baron continued, "that human creativity and willingness to see beyond traditional limitations make your species uniquely qualified to help guide this project. She also believes that human experience with overcoming seemingly impossible challenges will be valuable as other species attempt to expand their own communication capabilities." Kirilleth approached Marcus, her skin patterns glowing with warmth and friendship. When she spoke, It was with both her voice and her enhanced communication abilities, creating a depth of meaning that touched his heart as well as his mind. "You saw me when others saw only silence," she said. "You recognized potential where others saw only problems. This is what humans do. You find solutions in places where others see only obstacles. The galaxy needs this perspective as we work to build a truly unified civilization." Marcus looked around the chamber at the representatives of dozens of species, all of them experimenting with new ways of understanding each other. The scene was chaotic, beautiful, and full of hope for a future that none of them could have imagined just days before. "I accept," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "Humanity would be honored to help establish and guide this Center for Advanced Communication Research. We will contribute our creativity, our adaptability, and our determination to help build bridges between all species." The celebration that followed was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Representatives from across the galaxy began sharing their unique forms of artistic expression, creating a symphony of sight, sound, electromagnetic radiation, and quantum fluctuations that told the story of dozens of civilizations simultaneously. The translation systems had long since given up trying to provide coherent interpretation, but somehow everyone understood the meaning anyway. Baron Vextar stood beside his daughter, his pride evident in every line of his massive form. "Human Marcus, when you first came before me seeking trade agreements, I mocked your claims about human potential. I offered you what I thought was an impossible challenge, expecting you to fail spectacularly." He paused, his skin patterns shifting to configurations that Marcus now knew indicated deep respect and gratitude. "Instead, you have given me back my daughter and shown our entire civilization a path toward a future we never dared to imagine. The debt between us cannot be measured in trade agreements or political favors." Marcus smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility and opportunity in equal measure. "Baron Vextar, I think this is bigger than any debt between individuals or even between species. This is about all of us working together to build something that none of us could achieve alone." Kira Leth's enhanced communication reached him one more time, carrying a message meant only for him. "Thank you for teaching me that being different was not something to be ashamed of, but something to be proud of. Now I want to teach everyone else the same lesson." As Marcus looked out at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization, all of them working to understand and communicate with each other in ways that had never been possible before, he realized that humanity had found its place in the galaxy after all. Not as the most advanced species or the most powerful military force, but as the people who could see potential where others saw only problems, who could find solutions where others saw only obstacles. The Outer Rim colonies would have their trade routes. Earth would have its place in galactic civilization. But more than that, humanity had proven that their greatest strength was not in their technology or their military might, but in their ability to recognize and nurture the potential in others. The young Thessarian woman who had once been considered mute was now speaking to the galaxy in ways that transcended all previous understanding of communication. And it had taken human insight to recognize that her silence was not emptiness, but rather a fullness that exceeded everyone else's ability to comprehend. As the celebration continued around them, Marcus understood that this was exactly what humanity had to offer the galaxy: the courage to see beyond limitations, the creativity to find impossible solutions, and the wisdom to recognize that being different was not a weakness to be corrected, but a strength to be celebrated. The alien baron who had mocked humanity's potential had become their greatest advocate. The mute daughter who had been offered as an impossible challenge had become the bridge to a new era of galactic unity. And the human diplomat who had come seeking trade agreements had found something far more valuable: proof that when different perspectives come together with mutual respect and understanding, They can create possibilities that none of them could have imagined alone. The future stretched out before them, full of challenges and opportunities that would require the combined wisdom and creativity of every species in the galaxy. But for the first time since humanity had reached for the stars, Marcus felt confident that they would meet those challenges together, united by understanding that transcended the boundaries of species, culture, and traditional communication. In the end, Kirilleth had indeed spoken. But more than that, she had taught the galaxy how to truly listen.